I read through 11 books focusing on the head, face, and portraiture. I'm going to go through which ones I like the best and which ones you could probably skip. And then I'll present which ones you may want to get depending on your own budget and goals. Drawing books are an incredible value and one of the least expensive ways to learn. The median cost for one of the 11 books I got was only $23. I find that when an author writes a book, they tend to think really deeply about the material and they put a lot of work into presenting it in a coherent manner. I like the idea that someone has carefully thought through the information and how to best present and teach it to someone else. And you won't need all 11 of these books. You can get most of what you need from just a few of them. I've separated the books into 4 major categories. The first category is general head construction. These books teach you some of the basics of proportion and the facial features, and how to draw from observation and some basic construction. The second category is portrait drawing. Learning to draw an idealized head is a little bit different than drawing a person. Portraiture is a bit more focused on capturing the likeness and presence of a person. The third category is anatomy. These books narrow in on the anatomy of the head, face, and neck and give you a deeper understanding of what's going on underneath. The last category is facial expression. These books are specifically about facial expressions, giving insight into how the face moves when expressing emotion. Within these categories, we can also think of these books as primarily being useful for instruction, reference, or a hybrid of the two. I've also found that with many art books recently, that some of them seem to be more of a showcase of the author's artwork than anything else. I'm going to go through each category and give a brief overview of the pros and cons of each one of these books. The first category is general head construction, and I'll start with Drawing the Head and Hands by Andrew Loomis. I like that this book goes beyond just observational drawing. It covers idealized proportions of the head and features, drawing the head in perspective, and some good systems for thinking about form, structure, and the planes of the head. It's highly influential, and if you've heard of the Loomis method for drawing heads, it's from this book. It's called Drawing the Head and Hands, but about 85% of the book is on drawing the head, with only 15% on hands. The only downside of this book is that its presentation reflects the time in which it was written, which is 1943. It's still very useful, but it does teach within the context of a commercial illustrator from that time period, which is quite a bit different from today. The next book in this category is Heads, Features, and Faces by George Bridgman. Bridgman has a unique sculptural way of drawing. He emphasizes planes, masses, and construction. I do think Bridgman popularized some of these ideas 50 years ago. I'll admit that I don't quite get Bridgman. This one is pretty small, and so there's not a whole lot that's covered in this. And I think that Loomis tackles some similar material in a little bit clearer way. I may revisit him later, but I'm not sure that I could really recommend this one for a beginner. Loomis and Bridgman are the closest general purpose head drawing books, but with a little bit different emphasis. Loomis on system and proportion, and Bridgman on sculptural form. The next category is portrait drawing, and I'll start with Drawing the Head for Artists by Oliver Sinn. It covers some of the basics if you're just getting started with drawing. It gives some beginner instruction on drawing from observation. And I quite like Sinn's portrait drawings. I saw it as more of a showcase book for Sinn's drawings. His drawings are quite beautiful, but the instruction didn't really provide me with anything that I found particularly compelling or that I couldn't find in better detail elsewhere. The next book in this category is How to Draw Portraits in Charcoal by Nathan Fowkes. He gives some more specific instruction around working in charcoal. He presents the Riley method for head abstraction. In this book, he focuses a little more on value and shape than structure. He provides a great list of common mistakes in portrait drawing, and he actually provides some exercises. The author has a very specific style and approach as to how he does his portraits. He explains his process, which is useful, but following that process too closely might give you kind of a sad approximation of his specific style. His style is quite beautiful, and it's clearly built from years of experience with the medium and confidence in these charcoal strokes, which would be very difficult to emulate without those same years of experience. A good part of this book, I'd say the last 40 pages or so, is a showcase for his portrait drawings, although I still do feel like there's more valuable instruction in this book than there is in the Sinn book. The last book in this category is The Art of Portraiture by Stephen Bauman. I like that this book covers so much ground. It has some philosophy around drawing, which I find useful. He covers light and shadow in a way where I actually learn some new things beyond the basics. He presents a good introduction to anatomy to start understanding what's going on underneath without going into too many details, and he presents really clear models and illustrations. He shows some specific abstractions and techniques that are useful, and this book also has exercises to practice. It's clear to me that he put a lot of thought and work into making this book, and I honestly don't have anything bad to say about it. It feels like a really good mix of a lot of different things that are valuable to learn. So for this portrait drawing group, Sin's book is alright for head drawing from observation. Fowkes' book is best for the charcoal process and organizing values. And Bauman's book is the broadest treatment of portraiture as a complete discipline. The next category is anatomy, and I'll start with Form of the Head and Neck by Uldis Zarins. I feel like this is the definitive reference for head and neck anatomy. There are color-coded diagrams, model references, face scans, multiple views, and progressive blockouts. It shows variations based on age, sex, ethnicity, and body type. It's great for basic reference, but it goes into so many details. The only downside is that it's a bit expensive. On the Anatomy for Sculptors website, the PDF is $40, paperback is $60, and hardcover is $80. Although I think it's worth every penny, and I see myself referencing this for a long time. The next book in this category is Morpho, Face, Head, and Neck by Michel Lauricella. Some of the things I liked about this book are that it's a good little guidebook for visual study. It has reference for proportions, various angles, shapes that make up the head, basic skeleton reference points, and some nice ways of visualizing the forms of the face. It's quite small and it's not nearly as in-depth of a reference tool. And all the reference images are drawings themselves, which have gone through one layer of interpretation before we reference them. In some ways, this book feels like sketches of the study process of someone else learning this material. The final book in this category is Pocket Anatomy Volume 2, Head and Face by Warren Martin. Some of the things that I liked about this book are that it's quite broad for such a small book. It covers proportions and simplification, some clearly inspired by Loomis. It covers facial features and some basic anatomy. It goes over both teeth and hair, which many other references do not. It even dives into facial expressions. It covers a lot, but it doesn't give much time to any particular subject. It's kind of a broad overview of many of the different topics around the head and face. It overlaps quite a bit with many of the other books that do go into these subjects in greater detail. So for the anatomy books, Zarins' book is the deepest, most analytical, and most thorough. Lauricella's book is kind of a compact sketch reference, and Martin's book is the broadest compact overview for doing some quick lookup. The final category is facial expression, and I'll start with The Artist's Complete Guide to Facial Expression by Gairy Fagin. This book has some basics on head proportions, constructions, and features, but it really shines in its explanation of the facial expressions and emotions. It writes a good line as a hybrid of both instruction and reference. It has a fair amount of analysis in addition to providing reference images. The anatomy illustrations give you enough to understand the root of the expressions without being overly complex. It goes through the 6 basic expressions, but also shows different emotional intensity of those expressions. All the reference images are drawings, whereas photographs might be a more valuable way to reference facial expressions. The next book in this category is Anatomy of Facial Expression by Uldis Zarins. Now, I wasn't entirely sure which category to put this in because it is a great hybrid of both anatomy and facial expression. It's the best detailed reference you're going to find for facial bones, muscles, ligaments, and fats, basically anything happening underneath. There are color-coded diagrams and lots of photographic references. There are references for many different ages, genders, and ethnicities. It is incredibly detailed, and it gives a deep understanding of the why and how everything underneath moves and deforms. It's nearly pure reference. There's no instruction or real explanation around emotions. It's a great companion to Fagin's facial expression book, but not really a replacement. It also has some anatomical details which are maybe not quite as relevant to drawing. For example, it provides detail into the muscles that move the eyeballs in the sockets. I get why they included it, because it fits the framework for how they're consistently presenting all the information around muscle movement in the face. I'm just not convinced that it's necessary to learn to draw the eyes. The final book in this category is Facial Expressions for Artists by Oliver Sin. This book was a frustrating one for me because I didn't really find anything particularly useful in here compared to the other facial expression books. Once again, I see this more as a showcase book of Sin's portrait drawings. There's really nothing in this book that you couldn't get better instruction or reference from in the other facial expression books I mentioned. So for the facial expression books, Fagin's book is the best for how to understand and categorize expression and emotion. Zarins' book is best for learning how expressions are physically produced. And Sin's book presents basic observational expressions without really understanding what's going on underneath. As a bonus, we have the Anatomy Coloring book by Wynne Capet and Lawrence M. Elson. This book is kind of a fun way to learn and memorize anatomy. It only has 6 pages dedicated to the skull, face, and neck anatomy, and it seems a bit more aimed at people practicing medicine. I can't say that I would necessarily recommend this one if you're just learning the facial bones and muscles, but if you're trying to learn the entire musculoskeletal system anatomy, it might be a fun one to pick up. For my final recommendations, if you're only getting one book, I would recommend getting Drawing the Head and Hands by Andrew Loomis. This is a great starting book for learning to construct the head. It goes over so many of the basics, from proportions to perspective to drawing the features of the face and variations in age and gender. It's influential for a reason. Next, I would add The Art of Portraiture by Stephen Bauman. He presents the head not as separate parts, but as a cohesive whole. He goes over some foundations of light and shadow, some simplification techniques, some basic anatomy, and also some process and techniques around learning to block in the head. Next, I would add Form of the Head and Neck by Uldis Zarins. This gives you so many more details on how to understand the anatomy and the features of the face and the neck. And he also presents many different variations on those features that are important to understand. Finally, I would add The Artist's Complete Guide to Facial Expression by Gairy Fagin. This one is fantastic for giving both instruction and reference for understanding emotions and expressions at a higher level. I did some additional analysis on these books and what they cover, so I've put that on my website at negativespaceman.com. The link will be in the description below. It's totally free, and you can reference it in the future if you decide you want to get one of these books and you want some more information. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel to become a Negative Space Cadet and follow along with where we go next.